Hello, beautiful global people.
Hello.
Two chaps. Many cultures. How are you, Brett?
I'm fantastic. It's Tuesday where too much culture is absolutely barely never enough. Another wonderful day in the neighborhood here in beautiful Chicago. What about Atlanta, hot Atlanta?
Yes, it is hot, and I need to settle this for the record for once and for all. Only people that do not live in Atlanta call it Hotlanta.
Ouch.
Yeah, burn. And we'll have a guest later on this week who would hopefully confirm that. We'll have a fellow ATLian on this program later this week. So it is beautiful in Atlanta. It's a bit overcast, and yet it is humid, and yes, in high temperatures as would be expected during this time of the year.
As it should be. Well, isn't that interesting? I used what I would perceive is I thought everybody used that term in Atlanta. So that was my outside perception. And of course, this week is about outside perceptions and our identity and how other people see us. And as you mentioned, we do have a guest this week, and we do have one today. And I would like to introduce our wonderful audience to our wonderful guest. And we have Margaret Ohia-Nowak. Dzień dobry, pani. Witam serdecznie. Dziękuję bardzo. Witam.
Dzień dobry. Hello, everyone. Congrats.
Sure, leave me out of the conversation. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
So where are you joining us from, Margaret? Please tell us where you are in this beautiful world.
At the moment, I'm in the beautiful countryside near Lublin, which is eastern part of Poland, where I've been living for the past 5 years. And I come from Wrocław, which is the west part of the country. And this is now looking at Christian, former German city, Breslau.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, the weather is in Lublin is pretty nice as well. A little bit overcast, but sunny and good vibes. Good to see you both.
Good vibes. I love that. Welcome, and thank you for being on, Margaret. So help me again, because I'm the ignorant German. Yes, it used to be called Breslau before my grandparents did something crucial and horrible. And what's the Polish name of the city?
Wrocław.
Wrocław?
Yes, Wrocław.
Wrocław. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, you're gonna teach me Polish after this show. It's such a hard language for me, at least.
Okay.
How many other languages, Margaret? Do you have any other thing beside Polish, beside English, and?
Not really. Although I would love to speak Igbo, which is my origin. Half of my family is Igbo, Nigerian family. Unfortunately, I lived in Nigeria in my early childhood, but I didn't manage to learn Igbo because I went to a Nigerian school in Yoruba land, actually. So I would know a few words in Yoruba, but not really in Igbo. I was not raised in my father's land due to some personal reasons. My mom was a missionary doctor, medical doctor, working in a missionary hospital in Abeokuta, which is a western part of Nigeria, and that's why we were there. So, yeah. So I speak Polish, English, a little German from the high school and university, and a little Spanish. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, great.
That's more than I do. So I'm already put to shame again here. All right.
Good for me.
Now, of course, my wife is Polish, and I've been to Poland many times, and it is one of those places where you don't see a lot of people that look like you, Margaret. It is. I remember my first trip. Actually, I thought it was fascinating. It was in Warsaw, and I couldn't speak any of the language at that point, but it was interesting. In Warsaw, there was this huge market, the Jarmark, but a huge one in the soccer stadium, and there were actually a couple of African these wonderful entrepreneurs that were there selling in the market, and it was just fascinating to me because I hadn't seen in Poland anybody with black skin or anything like that, and I thought this is amazing. How these young men, young people would come here and just from their homelands and bring this wonderful entrepreneurial spirit. But even for the short time they'd been there, this Polish came out of them. It was like amazing, right? And I thought it was really fascinating. I spent all my time talking to these guys, and so for you, I mean, you've just kind of related. You come from Nigeria from a very early age. So, Christian asked you the question before we went live here. What do you identify? What is your identity? When people ask you.
Because I was predominantly living in Poland, I guess, Polish is just my natural self-dominant culture, and I speak Polish fluently, and this is my first language, so to speak. So when I was 2.5 years old, we moved from Poland to Nigeria, but I was already speaking Polish, and this is the Polish language is something that really draws me to this culture, to Poland, and just to living in Poland. So I had been living in a few countries in European, and I also lived in the US for some time, but I always felt this longing for Polish language, and I am obviously aware that Poland is a predominantly white country, so which brings this question of identity into a focal point, because but it's not only in Poland that I was not perceived as my real identity was, because I'm usually in Poland, obviously, before I speak, before I say something, I'm always perceived as a foreigner, or I'm actually complimented when I speak Polish. I'm complimented for my commandment of Polish, that I'm, your Polish is so fluent, and so on and so forth in Poland. I see the comment by Tayo right now, so
fellow Nigerian.
Fellow Nigerian, yeah.
Hello, Kedu. So so in Nigeria, it was very similar during my childhood. I have very similar memories that I was not perceived as one of them because I was called Oyibo, which is used for a white person. So I was similarly, but not parallelly, but for different reasons, excluded. So this feeling of not belonging to any community kind of went with me during my early childhood and my youth, and so on and so forth. And now it's not there anymore because I found a different point of reference, not being identified by others, but that I can choose who I can be, and even though this identity is very oftentimes imposed on me, and it's shaped by what others think. Before they meet me, before they speak to me, they already have these misconceptions and preconceptions about me and my identity, who I may be, and so on and so forth. And this is partly shaped by the lack of representations of people of color and African and Black people in Poland in real life, and lack of interactions, especially in the countryside and in smaller cities. And Brett mentioned Warsaw, which is obviously a more multicultural place, and definitely more comfortable to be if you are more visible in the society. So
I have a question, Margaret, because as a German, I'm aware that during socialist times, East Germany was a desirable place for a lot of people of color, especially from Africa, but also from Southeast Asia, fellow socialist countries, to send their talented youth to study in Europe. So East Germany, at least in university towns, had I don't want to say a fair share, but at least a noticeable number of people of color. Was it similar in Poland, or is that story different for Poland?
Yeah, the story was very similar because the communist government also invited students from African countries to study in Poland. It was part of a communist propaganda, like anti-imperialist movement and anti-imperialist kind of strategy to bring people. But it was definitely in a smaller scale than it was in Germany, because I know that the Afro-German community at that time was really growing already after the Second World War. So yeah, so in Poland, the 70s and the 80s, this is when my father went to Poland. He got the scholarship to study in Poland and met my mom in the late 70s. So yeah, there was this kind of opening up to the, at that time, third world countries, right? And quote unquote, of course, yeah.
I don't want to get too political, because Poland has just gone through an election cycle, and from what I read, the country is a little bit divided, similar to the United States. There are two major camps of worldviews and political ideas. Is this affecting people of color in Poland?
I would rather say that people of color are just silenced in Poland, I mean, they are kept silent. There is no discourse or anti-racist debate. The debate about racism is marginalized and excluded from the mainstream public discourse, so to speak. So there is this tendency to deny that there are any issues of racism or issues of people of color, because they don't exist. So there is this narrative that if they don't exist in public spaces, I see it as a vicious cycle, right? So if they don't exist, we don't speak about it, and we don't speak about it, so they are not visible in mainstream media, in education, in textbooks, and so on and so forth. So they are not really part of our culture and our system. So we will not speak about them. So of course, so there is. So I would say there is this strategy of mitigating the problem of that those people experience on a daily basis, especially political debate. There is
You said earlier that you found a new way to come to terms with your identity. I'm curious what that is. So are you choosing to be visible? Are you putting yourself in public places so your fellow Polish people can see that I am Polish too? How are you approaching this?
I guess so. It's not more so as to justify that I am Polish, that I want to be visible, so I want to show my Polish fellows that I am Polish too. It's more to just position myself as a Black woman or mixed race woman that is a scholar, because I'm a scholar, I'm an activist, so I also bring this topic of racism to the forefront of the discussion. So I guess it's not really about this situation shaped my identity, but I used my identity in order to convey some message to the world also, but also to support and to encourage the Black communities in Poland that are not, the Black communities in Poland are also marginalized. They are not, there are no Black-led initiatives or organizations or things like that. So we are kind of trying to make the Black community in Poland maybe more coherent and more kind of collaborative as well. So saying that I'm actually identifying myself as a Black Nigerian or a Polish Nigerian, I'm making a stand towards the Black community here, and I'm actually not speaking about my Polish identity so much, because my language discloses my identity. Because when I speak, even if I speak English, you can hear that I don't have a Dutch accent or a German accent or an American or anything, knows that I have an Eastern European accent. So even though I was, I was traveling, when I was traveling in other places, I would always be perceived as a person from that place to the moment I speak, and then there would be, oh, where are you from? So I would say I'm from Poland. Oh, Holland. So even even abroad, people would not think that the person of color would come from Poland, right, or from this part of Europe. Yeah.
Absolutely. And you've really taken the reins in your life. I mean, you are Dr. Margaret Nowak. This is you're an academic, as you mentioned, and you do take your experience and bring it into teaching and passing on this knowledge. So in those circles, in those academic circles in Poland, how is there a difference between the way that you're perceived in those circles as well?
Yes, definitely. Yes, Polish academia is very conservative, and I mean there is a difference in the sense that I am not, especially when I look, because I look at racism and the issues of racism in language and in discourse. Very oftentimes I'm not perceived as a person who will not be biased, who will be objective, who will have this kind of like very objective and like a broad perspective on things. So I would be accused of being biased and accused of being kind of like partisan, very partisan person who one-sided arguments and so on and so forth. So and I'm also a woman, so I would say that this is something that is not common. I mean, not being a woman, but a Black woman in academia, and speaking about racism in Polish language. For Polish linguists, it's always very confronting, and Polish people do not like to be confronted, and they also don't like to, publicly criticize, self-criticize. It's a very, very I guess, Polish thing not to be self-criticized, self-criticizing, you know what I mean? Like, I don't want to admit that I'm doing something wrong, so I will be objecting what you're saying just for the sake of it.
I have a probably very German question, and it may come across as a little bit too direct for some, but knowing a little bit about European history, I do remember that Poland has for centuries been a victim of the big powers that neighbor it, whether it be Russia, whether it be Germany, whether it be Austro-Hungarian Empire. Poland was always sandwiched in between superpowers and often fell victim to the big military or economic dominance at its borders. So is that maybe a reason why there is not a lot of inward looking in Poland, that we don't throw accusations at ourselves because that's uncomfortable? We've been victimized for so long. Why would we victimize ourselves? Is that something that is present, or am I just imagining that?
Yes, part of it for sure. It is not wanting to look at myself as an oppressor when I had been a victim for such a long time. But it's important also to remember that Polish society also had a long history of anti-Semitism, of xenophobia, and also of other isms, of other, classism, and so on and so forth. So. Part of it, yes, because it's always been an excuse, sort of. So we did not have colonies. There was no slavery here. We did not have colonies in Africa. There was no massive migration from African countries to Poland, and therefore we cannot be racist because we have no. There are no interactions with people of color in Poland. So, but this is kind of sustaining this white supremacy. So okay, I don't want to see at my color and my white privilege. This is very, very common in a lot of discussions, and this this comes up in many conversations that not only I have, but my friends who are white as well, with people that just do not want to see their unconscious bias, their unintentional sometimes, like kind of perception of the world. that puts them in a privileged position because of their skin color, even though when they migrate abroad, they are becoming these non-whites, right? Like sort of worse Eastern European migration. We spoke about it with Brett before the broadcasting about the Polish migrants who are so discriminatory against other minorities, ethnic minorities in the US, for instance.
Yeah. Well, this is very insightful, and I think you're doing important work, Margaret. It's I can only imagine what it is like for a person of color in a country where you're such a minority without representation or without public recognition. It might be even more difficult, as Jane said here. In many countries where Black people are silent, especially when locals deny the existence of racism, this denial makes it even worse to speak up about the discrimination, right? So I applaud you for your persistence. I applaud you for your work. How do you say it clear, say it loud? I'm Black and I'm proud in Polish.
Oh, well, this is the first time somebody's asking. Jestem czarna I dumna z tego, że jestem Polką.
There we go. Excellent. Love it. Love it.
Dobrze, dziękuję bardzo, piękne. No, so this is wonderful, and I know I think it's actually sad that we've got such a short period of time. I think this is actually potential of a bigger conversation, and again, we really appreciate your time, Margaret. Thank you so much for coming on for this short snippet. And thank you to everybody in the comments that came along. Our great friends here in the comments always show up for us and for our guests, and they get to meet the wonderful people we're meeting. You know, we don't know Margaret that well. I came across Margaret on some other discussions in our European circles, and I'm so glad we did. So thank you. There's just one final question here. Margaret, do you have children? Or know of any in Poland, wondering how they are raised with multicultural and racial mixed identity?
Yes, I'm a mother of my own personal daughter, so I have one children, and I know many. I know many multicultural and mixed race children in Poland, and people who raise children in this way. So work with these communities as well.
Beautiful,
wonderful, wonderful. Well, thank you again, everybody. Any final thoughts, my good friend Christian?
How do you say thank you? Dziękuję?
Dziękuję.
Dziękuję. All right, dziękuję, Margaret.
Thank you, Margaret. And we will see everybody tomorrow again for our another episode and another special guest. Thank you for joining today. Put your comments and questions. You can do that after the episode. And we will see you tomorrow. Thank you, Margaret.
See you. Thank you.
Thank you.